Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me and Dr. Bradford Lee today to talk about pronunciation research and teaching. My name is Dr. Linh Phung. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Eduling, the hub for task-based language teaching and learning. My research interest has been mostly on task-based language teaching, learner engagement, and different aspects of second language acquisition. So, Brad, would you like to say a quick hi and then we can get started?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Dr. Bradford Lee. Um, I'm currently working in a private university in Japan, and I've been in the TESOL industry for about 26 years. Similar to Lynn, I'm interested in some task-based stuff. I do a lot of different things, but my main the area of interest when I was in grad school was pronunciation and pronunciation instruction. So that's why I'm joining today.
Yeah, thank you so much for spending time with us. I know it is
Mhm.
10 p.m. in Japan, so it's quite late for you. But I would also like to give a proper introduction to Brad here. And so today we are joined by Dr. Bradford Lee, a language education researcher and scholar whose work focuses on applying second language acquisition research to teaching, materials design, and technology. He holds degrees in linguistics and applied linguistics from the University of Hawaii at Hilo and University of Newcastle in Australia, and Doctor of Education in TESOL from Anaheim University. I also want to mention that Brad and I are both graduates from the EDD in TESOL at Anaheim University. I did my dissertation under the supervision of Professor Rod Ellis, who I'm sure you know, while Brad was supervised by the renowned scholar Luke Blonsky. So, a little bit more. Dr. Lee is currently director of the International Center and a tenured professor at Fukui University of Technology in Japan, where he teaches communication skills, English, and TOEIC preparation courses. He's also very active in Japan Language Teachers Association, or JALT, as you know it, and serves on the editorial boards of international journals, including International Journal of Applied Linguistics and Technology in Language Teaching and Learning, with recent work focusing on pronunciation instruction, multimodal learning, and AI in language education. So, as you can see, he's very prolific in research and publication. So, Brad, maybe would you like to share a little bit about your hobbies? I know that you have a lot of other talents also.
Yeah. So I don't really have much time for those other hobbies these days, but I do several martial arts. That's why actually I was originally from the US, but I actually came out to Japan originally because I was interested in martial arts. And I like to stay physically active. And also I'm a photographer as well. Those are probably some of my biggest hobbies at the moment.
Yeah, that's great. So, Brad, let's get to it. And my first question to you also is simple here. Tell us more about you. Perhaps you have already told us a few things about you, but also what you are working on currently.
As you said in my introduction, I'm the director of the International Center at my university, and we have students from about 12 different countries, mostly from Asia at the moment. And so currently, what I'm interested in is, especially in the context of Japanese language, I'm into Japanese language curriculum building at the moment. Didn't mention in the introduction, but I am I'm a contractor for Duolingo, and I made the Japanese language course at Duolingo, and that kind of got me interested um, working with my international students at the university. Like Japanese language has different levels of formality. So there's like, how you speak with your friends versus how you speak with a teacher versus how you would speak with like respected elder. So there's very many different ways to say the same thing. And I noticed that with the international students, they have a good concept of, the basic politeness, but how to use like the higher level politeness or when they should downgrade to more casual, um, they're not that adept at it. And I think culturally, this goes into pragmatics as well, but like if we were to meet someone who maybe says the wrong word or the wrong grammar, we as native speakers, we can hear them like, oh, well, he's just learning. So we can forgive grammar mistakes or vocabulary mistakes. But when a speaker makes pragmatic mistakes, like says something that for us would be a little rude, we tend to be native speakers tend to be less forgiving. They tend to think not that, oh, he didn't really mean to say that, you know,
Mhm.
they more think like, wow, that guy he's really rude.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I recently I've been interested in developing Japanese curriculum for foreign students in Japan to help them better navigate those kind of cultural sensitivities and the pragmatic aspects of the Japanese.
Yeah. Wow, that sounds exciting. And I'm excited to hear that our knowledge and expertise can be applied to other languages. And so your Japanese must be very good then.
Yes, yeah, uh I'm pretty fluent in Japanese and especially how to use those kind of, different kind of levels of formality. I think I'm quite good at
Yeah,
it.
yeah. So
I
I'm
hope I
glad
am.
to hear that you worked with Duolingo, but at some point, who knows? You know that I have a language learning app, Eduling, and we do have the ambition of expanding into other languages as well. And I do hear you in terms of how important pragmatic competence is. And I know you have done research in terms of developing pragmatic competence with AI. But in today's conversation, we also want to focus on pronunciation. So I'm going to ask you the next question here in terms of pronunciation research and teaching, right? Could you share with us your experience researching pronunciation, instruction, and teaching pronunciation?
Sure. Well, this was my main project when I was in grad school. Pronunciation instruction, there's two main school of thoughts. So one is the explicit instruction and one is implicit instruction. And then within those two schools of thoughts, there's production and perception. So there's many different ways people go about teaching pronunciation. And what I was interested in is, well, out of all of these methods, which one proves to be the most efficient? This probably goes back to when I was a child. So I was born in the U.S., but for some reason I couldn't pronounce the R and L when I was in elementary school. And actually, when I was in maybe I think it's maybe second or third grade, I used to go to speech therapy. Um, I can't remember how often, but maybe like once a week or something. And I think that's probably where my interest in pronunciation and pronunciation instruction first started. I can't remember any of the techniques that the speech therapist used with me. I just remember I would go there and she would point at her teeth a lot and like, make the shapes with her mouth and stuff. That's all I can remember though. But when I was in grad school, yeah, that's my main dissertation topic. And so my main focus was production, actually saying the sounds versus perception, like being able to listen and distinguish, oh, this was an R or that person said an L. Um, and I compared these two domains. Um, what I ended up finding in my study, which was performed with Japanese university students, was that the perception for them to be able to hear the sound, that was an R and that was an L, that seemed to be more efficient for their eventual pronunciation. And one of the reasons why is I believe that the student has to be able to distinguish what they hear between an R and an L in order for them to kind of self-correct when they are speaking. Because if they were to say, an R sound, they should be able to check themselves, like, did I say it correctly? And if they're not able to distinguish when they hear other people say it correctly, it's more difficult for them to judge whether they themselves said it correctly or not. So that was my main takeaway from that dissertation study.
Wow, interesting. And that kind of makes sense in terms of second language acquisition, that we need to receive a lot of input, right? We need to also kind of internalize or represent the kind of knowledge
Mm.
in our mind before we can produce something. So I will ask more questions about that for sure. And it's fascinating to hear that you were interested in pronunciation when you were such a young age. And I remember I have always been interested in pronunciation as well, but maybe since the time that I came to the US, and I came here as a graduate student, but I got my teaching assistantship. So my first position was to teach other international students to talk more clearly, so that they can communicate their subject matters in English. And that was kind of my starting point in being interested in pronunciation. You mentioned the two schools of thought in terms of implicit instruction and explicit instruction, right? And in your research, I remember reading your papers. You argued that explicit pronunciation instruction has been shown to be more effective, and you also used the word efficient. So, can you explain what you mean by explicit instruction here? How is it different from implicit instruction? And perhaps you can elaborate on the efficiency and the effectiveness of explicit instruction. You can go technical in terms of citing your own papers here if you would like.
Well, so first, explicit instruction is when the teacher or someone were to tell the student, "Oh, no, that's not correct. You said this. You should say like this." And the when the someone explicitly says there has been a mistake, and here is what the mistake was. Here is how to fix it. So that would be explicit instruction, whereas the opposite is implicit, where the teacher doesn't say like you made a mistake. But for example, if the student were to say like, "Oh, I want to eat some lice," then the teacher would say like, "Oh, you want some rice," and then hopefully the student will pick up that what the teacher said was different than what I just said. So that the teacher is kind of giving hints, or like, "Oh, what did you say? Did you say lice or did you say rice?"
Mm,
And that would kind of give the student a hint that there are two different words here, and um, the teacher is hinting that you said the wrong one, or something like that. So that's implicit. However, implicit relies heavily on the student understanding the hint that the
mm,
teacher is trying to give them. So, um, for example, if the student says, "Oh, I want to eat some lice," and the teacher said, "Oh, do you want to eat rice?" And the student's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," and then he doesn't understand that he made a mistake, and the teacher is trying to give him a hint. So in that case, the student doesn't. We say notice, right? The student doesn't notice that a mistake has been made. Then it's very unlikely that any learning will take place. So in that sense, explicit instruction that teaches, "No, that's wrong. You said lice with an L. You mean rice with an R. So please say like this." That's much more efficient. But I do know that depending on the culture of the students, like some students much prefer explicit instruction, especially now in my context. I live in Asia, and so I think like many studies from China and Japan, the students want the teacher to say, "No, you are wrong. You made a mistake," and then tell them what their mistake was so that they can consciously try to um, improve for next time. Whereas some students, they don't like the teacher say, "No, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong." So like they want um, to go with the flow as much as possible, and only the teacher should only correct them if there's like a major breakdown in communication. Um, so yeah, I do think explicit and implicit instruction have their uses, and it's case by case. But for my context currently, yeah, I think explicit instruction is typically the way it's done in Asia, and luckily, the research show that it actually is effective.
So to me, it makes sense in the sense that when the students have already had the opportunity to maybe listen to the target language, to be exposed to the target language, and now when they produce the sounds and in communication, they can get kind of explicit feedback in order to notice their errors. So, I mean, when I think about explicit and implicit learning, they can be quite broad because through many years of exposure to the target language or even in the classroom, they have already received a lot of implicit instruction in some way, right? And so talking about again pronunciation instruction, and you describe the to me it's more like corrective feedback, and it seems like during meaning focused activities as well, and that is really compatible with task-based language teaching. The next question, can you talk a little bit more about perception-based instruction and production-based instruction and describe the kind of intervention that you had in your research?
In my study, that was quite a long time ago. It was about maybe almost 10 years ago, or
Is it
maybe, yeah.
2015? You
Yeah.
have you also had your research published? I because I just read those papers in 2022 and 2020.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So for the original study that we were talking about, so for example, we had minimal pairs. For example, only one sound is different between words. For example, like I said, lice and rice or whatever. And so for the explicit instruction group, I believe I would do, for example, I would give a small talk. Okay, so this is the R sound, and I would say how to make the sound. Okay, you want to make your mouth in a circle, and then and then for the L sound, you want to push your tongue against the top of your roof of your mouth. So I would give them physiological instructions, like how to shape their mouth, how to use their tongue, where in their mouth the sound should be originating from. For a vowel, like it's in the back, or it's a high or low. And then I would have the students. I would have a word, and the students would pronounce it, and then I would give feedback. For the perception group, what I believe I did was they were not to talk, and I would show minimal pairs, and I would say, like, for example, pit, and then I would show, like, pit, and for example, like a pet, and it's like, okay, which one did I just say? And they would like point to the one I said. So they weren't saying anything; they were only responding to what they could hear. So that was what I called perception-based training. What was the next question?
And so that's the intervention. That's interesting. That's perception based, that they would just have to distinguish between the two sounds
Yes,
that they can
yes,
hear in the
yes.
input. And it could be minimal pairs in words or minimal pairs in sentences, I imagine,
I think for
in
that one, it's just basic words.
basic
Yeah.
words. But what was the finding? Do you remember that the perception based was superior in helping students to produce the sounds better?
Yes, yes. And then, so when we're talking about just sounds, we call that segmental.
Mm.
Um, the opposite, or the counterpart of segmental, is suprasegmental. So suprasegmental involves tone and rhythm and stress of the words. Um, so I believe, so I had four groups. So there's segmental targets, explicit, sorry, segmental targets, production perception. Then it's supra segmental targets,
Production perception.
production. Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah. I believe that the supra-segmental perception-based group had the best post-test results, I believe.
But I think that one of the conclusions from your research is that perception based instruction can be
Yes,
effective. So, when you want to train
yes,
students on distinguishing difficult sounds, it seems to me that a good starting point is perception based instruction,
right,
helping
right.
students to listen and hear the differences before perhaps providing production opportunities, or maybe teachers don't need to think about those two distinctions too much, but they have to make sure that students have a lot of opportunities to listen to the target sounds, and they can have really specific intervention in the way that you just described to help students to really distinguish those sounds, right? So that's what I remember from your research,
Yes.
or at least
Yeah,
the
and
takeaway.
yeah, and obviously the study was very unnatural
Mm,
because you're never going to have solely production or
mhm,
solely perception in the actual classroom. Usually in the classroom, it's going to be listen and repeat. So that's
mhm,
perception and production like at the same time. So the study was unnatural in the sense that I forbid the students from speaking, because I wanted to see only perception. So, of course, when you do it in an actual classroom, you can get the best of both worlds. But yeah, like I think a lot of people think, oh, pronunciation, the students have to, pronounce something, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, like you said, the first step.
mm. Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to ask you some difficult questions here as well. And if you remember your research with others in 2020, oh, sorry, 2022, in your research in 2022, the findings suggest that immersion or exposure and the general sound processing abilities play a significant role in the perception and production of the L and R sounds for Japanese learners. So, immersion, meaning that you're living in the country that speaks the target language, like Japanese learners living in the US or in other English speaking countries. Exposure means that you spend time learning the language, and mostly you hear the target language, perhaps in the classroom, right? So exposure can be understood that way. And also here, the general sound processing abilities, your ability to process sounds, distinguish different sounds in your language or in other languages. So the findings suggest that immersion or exposure and the general processing abilities play a significant role in the perception and production of the two very difficult sounds for Japanese learners. So, does this mean that aptitude, right, the ability to process sounds and input are key to speech learning? Right, not the production, not the kind of drilling or practice in the classroom, but the aptitude and input are key to speech learning. So that's my first question. And if aptitude and input play such a significant role, then what is the role of instruction? I'm sure you have an answer to this, but those are my two questions for you, citing that research.
I wouldn't say that aptitude and, what was the other one? Aptitude and,
And input, exposure, right?
right. I wouldn't say it's, um, dependent on speech learning. I think for that study, it was talking again about pronunciation. So how the eventual level of like native like pronunciation. I think it might be discouraging for some people to hear, but yeah, aptitude does play a role. Well, in our study, we found that it did play a role in the level of eventual um, pronunciation accuracy. So that study that you mentioned from 2022 was quite interesting because we were joined by a man who is very interested in like musical. I don't think he was a linguist, but he was like a musician
Can you
And
mention his name?
yes,
So we know. Okay.
Adam Tierney.
Mm,
And yeah, so some people are just good at you know hearing like a rhythm or a beat, or they can sing well. So everyone does have some kind of like, I don't want to say musical, but like sound related aptitude. And so we were interested in how does that apply to applied linguistics and second language acquisition. And that study, we had a location, so some students in Japan, and then some Japanese students who were living in the UK. So that's where we had the different groups. And of course, the students who are living in the UK are listening, hearing English and using English on a daily basis. Their aptitude, not sorry, not their aptitude, their English, both their ability and their pronunciation accuracy were much higher than the English as a foreign language group who is in Japan and only studying Japanese 3 hours a week. And then we had some tests about auditory processing. It was kind of a groundbreaking, kind of like a new way of assessing um, audio processing, and it was kind of like based on AI as well. So if a student were to get uh, an answer wrong, it would get like a little easier. And then if they're getting it right, it would get
adaptive.
like a little
Yeah.
harder. Yeah, it's adaptive. So
Mm,
back then, it was quite quite advanced. And yeah, we did find that the students who had a greater ability to distinguish between two tones
mm.
in that testing, they ended up having greater pronunciation accuracy. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So exposure and aptitude do play a role, right? But what about
Exactly. Yeah.
instruction?
I think that instruction helps if make the process more efficient and
Mm,
faster.
mm,
So if the student, like I said before about noticing, if the student can notice their mistakes, that could help probably mitigate the exposure to some extent. For example, if a student is living in the UK, but they're not, and they're making the same, mistakes, and no one is really telling them you're pronouncing that wrong or something, they're never going to get better. Whereas maybe if the student were to get, instruction right away, they could reach their eventual target like much faster.
mm, mm. Yeah. So this is something I can say from experience. Obviously, English is my second language, and I became interested in pronunciation when I came here. I'm sure that I mispronounced a lot of words, and I still needed to improve my pronunciation a lot since the time that I came here. And everyone complimented on my pronunciation, but now and then I still realize that I make mistakes. So, but the thing is that I feel that actually my pronunciation improved over time. I never made it my purpose to sound like a native speaker. So I didn't really kind of invest time into trying to pronounce this and that. But I still remember the kind of feedback that once in a while that I received. Like I remember early on when I was dating my now husband, he told me that when you pronounce the word time, it always sounds like tam, like in Vietnamese, tam, because we have that syllable or vowel in Vietnamese. So I don't think that after that feedback, I improved right away. It might have taken me a year or even longer to improve that sound because finally I got it. It's a long vowel there, time, right? So it took a long time from realizing that I did something wrong to improve it. And then, but other times I could improve faster. So at one point, I was talking with a pronunciation teacher because I was working with her. And she said, and I said, could you give me feedback on my pronunciation? And of course, she complimented my pronunciation, but she pointed out a word like the word diagnose. And she said, you dropped the G, the G, there. And so that I could fix a little bit faster. And another example is when I said the word accept. And for some reason, I realized that I said accept, no K, no K there. And then I could also change it very quickly. So it's kind of interesting in terms of the interplay between input and explicit instruction, or in this case, just explicit corrective feedback in affecting pronunciation. My take is that we need both. We need a lot of exposure. And I think your research confirms that the perception-based instruction is superior because of the input that learners need in order to at some point produce it. So I can go back to that research and ask you that question actually. So your research has shown that perception-based pronunciation instruction is superior, at least for that short intervention, than production-based pronunciation instruction. Production-based is when like the teacher say after me, repeat after me, produce this word, right? So can you elaborate on why, what mechanisms behind perception-based instruction that make it more effective in this case? Any theories here?
Well, I don't know if this is answering your question or not, but regarding the examples that you just mentioned from your own experience, I think that so that the 2022 was it? Yeah, the
Mm,
2022 research that we were talking about earlier, it well, we found that when the students, so in Japanese, there actually is a sound that sounds, it's just exactly in the middle of an R and an
mm,
L,
mm,
right? It's kind of like a blended sound. And so when the students, for example, okay, how should I say this? If there is a sound that is present in the native language, um, the students have much more trouble acquiring it than if it's like a sound that is not present in the native language.
mm,
So when you were saying the example about time,
mhm,
so because it's very kind of similar to something that it exists in Vietnamese, that would be much harder for you. We would anticipate that would be much harder for you to acquire than something that's totally different, like maybe like diagnose, that's
mm.
a brand new sound or a brand new word. Um, so I don't think that answers your question exactly, but when you were saying your examples, I thought that does actually line up quite well with our findings. The exact mechanisms, I'm not quite sure how to answer.
My theory, and I think I have already mentioned it during this conversation, is the enormous important role of input, right? And also of implicit learning. You mentioned explicit instruction. I believe that it does have value. It helps students to notice something, but only when they get that kind of exposure to help them to distinguish the sounds, right? The exposure can come from natural input or naturalistic input by just hearing and listening and communicating so that you get input from your interlocutors. But also in this case, you can have more intentional intervention, helping students to distinguish the two very difficult sounds because they don't exist in their language. So that is my take. I don't know whether that is adequate in terms of explaining. This is based on your 2015 study with so Lee, Zhang, and Polonsky, 2015, a meta-analysis.
Oh, that's not
That's not
me.
new. Okay,
That's a
but
different
anyway,
a different Lee.
I can read this to see what your take is with the finding here. So considering the conclusion, actually the conclusion from that meta-analysis conducted in 2015 is that the conclusion is that it is unclear whether pronunciation instruction has an effect on spontaneous communication. So, spontaneous communication, maybe when you did an intervention, there was an effect on students' controlled production, right? They would have to pronounce words or individual sentences. So that is pretty controlled, and you found an effect of instruction on their production of the target sounds. But in that meta analysis, the conclusion is that it's unclear whether pronunciation instruction has an effect on spontaneous communication. I want to hear your comment on that. And then the second question, and you and I attempted to do a project on task-based pronunciation teaching, and there was a special issue, I think, from studies in second language acquisition on task-based pronunciation teaching. So, do you think that task based pronunciation teaching has the potential to bridge the gap between controlled practice and real life language use? Perhaps it has more potential of helping students to actually improve their pronunciation in spontaneous communication, not just in the controlled environment in the classroom.
Yes, sure, I do. I do think that task-based training does. I personally do believe that it does help the students improve their pronunciation in spontaneous speech. I think this is. I'm not 100% sure, but I have a good feeling that when they did the meta-analysis in 2015, the findings were more reflective of the poor study designs of those kind of earlier studies, so before 2015. So like when we were doing our project, we assessed the pronunciation using tasks, but it was
Mm,
in a way that was as close to spontaneous speech
mm,
as we could. So what basically one of the common protocols these days is you would give the students like some keywords, like for example, like white and uh, newspaper, and the target that you're actually looking for is an R and an L.
mm,
So you would say like you know what's a good word, like read or something,
mm,
right? So white newspaper read. And then you would show a picture of a man sitting on a bench, on a white bench, like reading a
mm,
newspaper.
mm,
And the student has to describe this picture using the three keywords that were given. And only one of the keywords is the actual target you're looking at, and the others are distractors. So then they're like, "Oh, there's a man. He's sitting on a white bench and he's reading a newspaper." So within that sentence, the target that we're looking for is there,
mm,
but the student's attention is not focused on pronouncing this R correctly. So in those kinds of, I think that's kind of like a more modern kind of standard assessment type in studies. So I think what the meta-analysis found is that the ways that they were being assessed were like kind of all over the place. That's why it wasn't really certain what the effect was on spontaneous
okay.
communication.
Mm,
That's my feeling. But I think
mm,
if everyone was using the same protocols, like the ones that we just discussed, I think they would find like a higher correlation between the instruction and spontaneous speech and accuracy improvements.
Okay, that's a good explanation because I also remember that that meta-analysis focuses on methodologies, right? Research methodologies and the way pronunciation is assessed, and in this case, in a very controlled manner. And now that you mentioned our research project, I remember developing all of those
Right.
activities and tasks to put on the Eduling app. And we do have a perception based, and I remember you call it forced discrimination. What is the term? Forced discrimination activity or
Right,
exercise.
right, right.
Yeah. So they have to hear two words and then they have to identify whether it is the L and the minimal pairs. But we
Yes.
also have a picture description task. And I still have all those images in my mind, not all, but some, because I spent so much time developing those activities. And I agree that assessment is important in the sense that if you want to see whether something has an impact on spontaneous communication, then you need to use more kind of performance-based tasks to assess, right, their ability to pronounce certain things. So maybe this is a short pitch that if any of the researchers or teachers here want to do research with these pronunciation features, then the Eduling app actually is set up to do experiments like this. But I have to say that it was quite challenging to carry out that research project. One thing is to develop the materials, right, to measure students' learning, and also to come up with an intervention. But the enormous challenge is actually data collection, right? So in an experiment, we have a control group and two comparison groups, and that part is very, very challenging in terms of doing a proper study. So I just want to share, since we are talking about research, my take is also that yes, instruction plays a role, but then students and teachers have to go way beyond that to provide abundant opportunities for students to use the target language. And in task-based language teaching, we can provide incidental focus on form, basically what you're saying about corrective feedback. So say when the student describes the picture, and I remember this picture, a window with a butterfly and a windowsill, right? There's the R sound there. And then if they make mistakes, then perhaps the teacher can intervene by giving corrective feedback, and the corrective feedback can range from implicit, like a recast, right? You mentioned a recast. Did you see a butterfly, or a clarification request, or something more explicit? Also, you said the word butterfly wrong. It should be said this way. You can see that I'm passionate about task-based language teaching because I see the combination of meaning-focused attention and opportunities to focus on form, right? Incidentally, so that students can notice, and then later on they can make adjustments, or they can notice more features, those features in the input, and also attempt to produce the sounds more correctly. My last question to you is, maybe could you highlight the best insights from pronunciation research for teachers who want to address pronunciation in the classroom? Another related question: how can technology applications be designed to teach or address pronunciation? Any suggestions? I'm sure you don't have like all the solutions for technology development, but if you can share some insights, things that we need to remember.
I'll do the AI one first then.
Yeah, we
So
haven't touched
the
AI, surprisingly.
so for pronunciation instruction, this is even like way before the whole AI era, but it's what is it? High variation. Is it high variation pronunciation training? I forget, but basically like one of the most effective ways is to for the student to be able to hear different examples of the same
Mm.
sound.
Yes, yes, I remember
So
that research. Yeah.
only listening to one person is not enough exemplars for the student to really grasp it. So the best scenario is to speak to as many people as possible, um, different nationalities, male, female, different ages, and when the student can get input from all different kinds of people saying the same word, then they're able to form in their mind, like it's like the R sound is not just here, but it's like this range.
Mm,
Every sound like in this area is recognized as the R sound, so that they can make a more clearly defined border. This is the R area, and then once you cross this line, it becomes L.
mm,
You know,
mm,
so of course, these days, there's a lot of So even like, we use Chat GPT or something, like we can choose what voice we want to talk to us.
Mm,
There's male, female, and there's like different accents and whatnot. So for students or for teachers who want to give their students more input, that is a very useful tool because that's instant access to many different exemplars.
mm,
So if you say to ChatGPT, okay, like speak, like if you're doing the audio function, not the typing function, but if you can say, "Oh, please talk to me like in a British accent," it'll talk to you in a British accent. It's like, okay, like please, become a like a 6-year-old girl. It will change the voice for you.
mhm,
So I think one of the good tools, especially for a teacher who might not be so confident in their own pronunciation, is to use AI to get the more variation of exemplars. Of course, the internet, we
mhm.
could do that from a long time ago, but a lot of students are shy to
Yeah,
speak with real,
now that you mention
yeah.
it, I can mention this website, and a lot of people recommend it, but I don't use it so much. Youglish. So basically, when you put in a word, then it will give you thousands of videos,
Oh,
clips of people saying a sentence. Basically, it's a collection of YouTube videos, but it can be used for pronunciation. You put in a word, and then you can listen to thousands of different people saying the word. So that can be useful in the sense that the students need to hear the
yeah.
sound or the word pronounced or said by different accents and different people in order to acquire it, if you may say so.
And also the good thing about that too is that it gives the students like more confidence, because they can hear that, oh, like it's not exactly like only one version. Like you can say a little different, and it's still native. The concept of native is like so wide. So it's a confidence builder, and it's good for making the connections like in the brain. This is a very minor topic perhaps, but in the research I've done a lot with Japanese students is like the R and the L sound.
Mm,
We actually kind of like discovered like the I guess the way to teach proper R and L pronunciation. It has to do with like most people focus on the tip of the tongue, like
mm, mm,
versus
mm,
right? Like but actually, what we found in that 2022 paper, like, is the formants
mm,
in the mouth. Especially, I think it was F2. But anyway, F2 formant has to do with the placement of the back of your tongue.
mm,
And I think a lot of pronunciation teachers never think about, teaching students how to maneuver the back of their tongue when they're
mm,
doing pronunciation instruction. But if you can imagine, like the back of your tongue, normally it's in the lowered position. But if you were to like raise up the back of your tongue to, for example, like if you're gargling or something, to try and like close off the back of your throat, right? If
mm,
you raise up the back of your tongue and then do the classic, put your lips into the
mm,
then we found that having the students do that um, improve their accuracy quite a lot.
mm.
So that was one of the interesting things that I learned in that study, using the acoustic analysis of the formants or the shape of the tongue. It's quite interesting. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
that's quite interesting because when I read the paper, the paper mentioned the different formants and different hertz, right? Frequency in
yeah.
our sound, and it's quite technical for me because I haven't used any software to analyze speech that way. But just yesterday, when I was talking with Nick, my colleague here at Eduling, he couldn't participate in today's session due to a family situation. but he was showing me the signals. His expertise is in speech recognition and signal processing. So he actually showed me we were processing the interview with Rod Ellis. So he showed me how my formants or my frequency is different from Rod Ellis. And then I remember your concept of the formant, and especially F2, as you mentioned, for the L and the R sound. And then I started, and my mind always is thinking about, okay, how we are going to apply this to help students to realize maybe things that they can do differently so that they can produce the sounds better. But it's fascinating, and to those of the teachers or researchers or interested students who are listening, and interested in doing pronunciation research, I also find that fascinating in terms of using applications to really look at your voice and your
See
sounds,
what's happening. Yeah.
fingerprints. Yeah, you can
Yeah.
visually, you can see it. So maybe last question, since we mentioned it, do you have any suggestions in terms of to those who are interested in doing research in pronunciation? And maybe you can mention the tools as well. I know you use Pratt to analyze the sounds. Maybe talk to us just a little bit about it.
So Pratt, I think it's spelled Praat or
Yes, yes.
Praat.
It's
Yeah,
open
that's
source, right?
yes, yes. So that is like the go-to tool for a lot of speech researchers who deal with speech aspects. And you so you use a different software to record audio samples, and then you analyze through Pratt. And there are a lot of like um user programs like out there. So just like the base software is capable of doing like so many different things, but you have to have like programs in order to like look for different things or do different analyses. So actually, it's a huge, it's a huge online community of researchers and Pratt users. So like I can't even begin to talk about that because it's so massive, and I'm not. I only use it for very few things. But like, fellow researchers, they use the Pratt system and they can make like audio tests. So if they're doing assessment like in a study, they can have, it set up in Pratt so that it plays the sound and then the student clicks on, left or right or all that kind of stuff. So yeah, once you like get into it, it's a huge deep dive. It can do like so many things.
Mm, mm. Okay. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that it takes a lot of time to learn
It
those
does.
tools. Yeah, and it's
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
community there. But that just kind of opens up to those who are interested in speech processing, speech recognition. I know that I think technologically, they are popular fields. So maybe just an idea in a different direction here. Okay, so thank you so much, Brad, for spending time with us. I know
No,
that it
thank you for
is,
having me.
yeah, I know that it is quite late there, and it has really clarified a lot of things for me. But my take is still that students who want to improve pronunciation need to do both, right? In terms of being exposed to the target language, receiving a lot of input orally, but also looking for opportunities to communicate. And when you think about intervention, it has some value, but it can supplement the kind of exposure that you should have with the target language in order to improve it. But in terms of techniques, I really liked your suggestion of exposing students to variation of the pronunciation feature, either by using AI for it to have different voices, different accents, also feeling confident about exposing students to non-native English speaker accents as well, right? The other thing in terms of using insights from research, even with your research with the L and R, that when you discover how F2 is so important for students to hear the differences, but also to pronounce those sounds, then that's also very valuable for instruction and to me for technology development as well. So again, thank you, Brad. And if you want to learn more about Dr. Bradford Lee, you can reach him through his website. Here, I can read it aloud: bradfordjlee dot wordpress.com. And you can see his publications there. And I will share other opportunities and announcements on my Facebook page. So please feel free to follow me there. But Brad, any last word before you go to bed?
No, no, but thank you everyone for joining. And yeah, if you have any questions, like you said, please feel free to contact me.
Well, thank you so much and hope to see you again online and in future conferences.